Hi there, thank you so much for clicking the thumbnail and being interested in my work. In this video I share with you my techniques and tips on how I created this baby's eye using pastel pencils. So be sure to watch it right through till the end, because here and there I'll be slowing things down in real time so you can take a closer look. So let's dive in and take a look. Right, so it's just a little study. It's 3-inch square, so I'll just put a centre point in there because I'm doing it freehand. I always do a centre point, so I get used to doing that. All becomes relative then, everything fits in the space. So from this centre point I'm using imaginary angles, just laying down some light marks to start with, getting a feel for the shape and everything, and then going over a bit sort of darker. But what I'm using is a Faber-Castell kneadable eraser, which is an amazing tool because you can actually shape the marks into what you need. Always put a little bit of white in the highlight as well, but just a simple quick outline. So here's the basic colours I use for an underdrawing normally. So starting off laying some white in there just to lighten up that grey and to add some pigment to that pastel mat. It just sort of fills in that tooth a little bit. For the white of the eyes there I'm using orange and blue, and then just laying over some red, warm red, yellow ochre. Just sort of getting some pigment down that I can move around when I start putting the rich colours on. Just varying the pressure, more pressure where it's lighter, less pressure where it's mid-tone on the white. Normally I use these Caran d'Ache rich colours. All they are really is a yellow ochre mix and a warm red mix. Makes a pink. So you can actually mix these easy by just having one pencil, which is the Chinese white, and just glaze over with whatever you've got. But initially I've put these in just to see what it will like, but you could always mix this colour by, like I say, just using red and white together. And here, if you haven't got the flesh tint 5%, just add yellow ochre and white together and you've got this colour. So like I say, all you need is the white of the Caran d'Ache and then just mix whatever brand you've got with it, and you've got that same vibrancy then. And from now on I'm only using the white and then just glazing over with different colours just to show you how it works. Now a perfect combination for skin tone is warm red, yellow ochre. And then here, if you're wanting some chroma, because the skin tone tends to glow in certain places, just add that lemon yellow just a little bit and it makes all the difference. And to create natural shadow, use the complementary colour, so I'm using green and red together initially here. If you're enjoying this video, why not subscribe? It's absolutely free, and then you're sure not to miss any of my future videos. Now for the white of the eyes I'm using that blue again and the orange. Initially I'm using that shade of blue, but I will change it up to an ultramarine blue and a cold red later to make purples. On the iris here I'm just putting that blue in, and also on the pupil. But then I tried brown but it wasn't dark enough, so then I've gone in with a black then. And then just using that Carbothello white just to soften things up, because it's quite a chalky pastel. It helps to blend things as well, so that's why I tend to use for blending. On this part I'm using the blue and the orange again to create a natural shadow, but then going over with a bit of cold red, which would actually create purples, and it creates a right subtle shadow of that white of the eye. Now I'm using brown and blue for the dark areas of the iris to start with. It makes natural shadows again using brown and blue rather than black. If you can get away with doing that, always best to do that, but sometimes you need to add that little bit of black to it. But desaturating the blue as well with orange. So you're playing about with different sort of colour combinations just to get a feel for it, but this is just the the rich stage. All the details will be put in later. Now in places I'm adding these two colours as well, which is the Caran d'Ache warm red and yellow ochre. Really nice and rich colours, and sometimes adding that, it adds that little bit of freshness to it. This red is actually vermilion, so it's a beautiful colour for skin tone. And again, the saturation using the complementary colour, which is the green. Really makes a difference when you add these sort of highlights as well in the corner of the eye and just underneath the eyelid there. Just got to keep adding these layers, layer after layer, just keep building it up, and every layer is subtleties you add over subtleties, and that's what creates that realism. Now when you squint the eyes, you see the values, and some of the values are like really vibrant. So these parts I use the Caran d'Ache because it's more sort of fresher, and then use the Carbothello to just blend with. Just like to take this opportunity to thank all my Patreons for all their wonderful support every month. I can't thank you enough, it means so much to me. If you're considering joining me on Patreon and would like the benefit of longer, slower and more in-depth videos, please check out the link in the description below. Now, in some areas of the skin it's the cold red, so you have to sense the temperature, lightly mix it in with the white you've put underneath. Now for the eyelashes, I'm just putting in very lightly to start with, hardly any pressure on that pencil. I'm not looking too much at the detail, I'm actually still sensing the energy and everything, and just let them details just happen rather than really focusing on them. So when you sense something's quite watery, put the white down first, then just glaze over them with the lemon yellow and the cold red, and you get that sort of watery feel to the eyelid there. Now I'm putting in the actual sort of crease in there. I just used the warm red with a bit of blue to create like a purpley colour rather than using the green. It's very subtle with baby's skin. There's hardly any sort of creases in that, so it's very, very subtle. I've realised with this study that I ought to be using this tool more often. It's a colour shaper, it's a silicone tip, and it's just like using a paintbrush. You can just put some pigment down and just move it around and blend ever so subtly with it. You have to really put a very, very light pressure on though, because if you put too much over pressure it just takes the pigment off. Now here there's subtle sort of eyelashes that are like light, bright, so I'm putting those in. But you have to be careful not to be too harsh about it, so you just have to soften them up a little bit, just glaze over them so they're not too white. So you have to be aware when you do put the white in initially that you do cover it with a colour, because you've got to keep that sort of value ratio right. Again for the details there, I'm just putting a little bit of pigment and then use that colour shaper just to move things around, and then just keep going over the white and glaze the colour, and then it just develops eventually. Now the eyebrows are hardly noticeable on this reference image, so you have to be very, very sort of delicate with it, and I'm mixing sort of red and the green together to create a natural grey. And you know, I can always make that a skin tone so it's easily to move around, so it's a good idea to use that sort of combination when you're doing this sort of thing. And then you're just going in between with like white, so you're just creating that sort of texture, and then just keep glazing, and that it's just a case of just keep putting that white down and glazing over the top and working on those subtleties. If you're enjoying this video, why not give it a like and share it with your friends? It would mean so much to me, as this would help the channel to grow. Well, I had a little break and looked in the mirror, and I noticed actually that the iris wasn't the right shape. So things are easily enough to move around, so I've used the brown again and just really sensing that feeling of the eye while you're doing it. So you don't want to be changing things and just focus on details. You've still got to feel that connection, so you open the heart, let go of the mind, connect to the energy of the reference image. So by sending this open heart feeling to the reference image, the energy shines back at you. So I'm still connecting like that, even though I'm trying to correct things. So I'm totally connecting, feeling and sensing, and just letting these details just happen. Doing the same on the other side as well, just using the brown first. And then I'm sort of making that white darker as well. It's just a case of really squinting your eyes, having a look at the values, and these final details. It's all about getting the edges correct as well, where things are sharper in some areas and they're softer in others. So the colour shaper comes in handy for that sort of thing. So I do look in the mirror, or the reflection of the mirror, quite a lot when I'm doing portraits. And sometimes I just take a photograph with my mobile phone as well, just to see the actual painting or drawing from a different perspective or smaller image, and it brings out sort of imperfections that needs to be sorted. So constantly doing that, just making sure things balance correctly. Just adding a little bit of white to these eyelashes here just to tint it lighter a little bit because it was too prominent. With this little study I was experimenting with having a bigger picture at the side, so I had two reference images shown on my monitor, one small so I could see the whole of the image, and then one big so I can see the details. And I noticed that I was looking too much at the big one for the details, and then it threw me off because things would becoming too dark or misshaped because I was studying the bigger one too much. And then when I started to look at the smaller one, I could see what was the issues and that. So it's a learning curve. I'm trying different things all the time, so I will make sure that I always look at the small one to get the energy and the feeling of it. See, the idea thing is to see the actual image as a whole, and then you paint it or draw it as a whole rather than seeing as little bits. But if you blow things up to copy from, sometimes you can sort of separate things while you're painting. Now for the extreme white of the eyes, because that's the lightest part of the actual study, I'm using a Rembrandt stick there, which is really rich in pigment and it really is bright. Then I use the Caran d'Ache to sort of blend it in, so I'm moving the pigment around with that white. So I'm being aware of the temperature as well, and the white of the eye is quite cooler, so I'm putting some purples in there and making sure both the whites are correct and feel correct. Using the colour shaper there as well. Now there's a little tip, you know, around the pupil, if you just put a bit of burnt sienna, it just makes it look more alive, the eye. Thanks for watching the video right till the end. If you're interested in seeing more of my work, please check out this link here.